Thank you, Dr. Radwan. I greet your guests and all the participants in this webinar. I would like to thank you for this initiative, this good initiative, which is in reality, which reminds us that it's not only in Syria. In Tunisia also there are political prisoners, and we are all overjoyed with what is happening and what has happened in Syria. I hope the transition to democracy happens smoothly and successfully in Syria. We all know that Tunisia lived through a democratic transition after the revolution of 14th of January 2011. And this phase, this transition, we know that the Tunisian people witnessed free and fair elections, and they experienced freedom of expression, freedom of opinion. Then we had the setback on the 25th of July 2021. You know that the elected president, Qais Said, who was elected thanks to the revolution and the gains of the revolution, the elected president himself undertook a coup against institutions and against the constitution and set himself up since that date, set an authoritarian system resulting in violations of freedoms. And today we are here to talk about political prisoners who are in prisons, and also Tunisians who are prosecuted for their ideas and their opinions and their political practices. To set the context for this event, we lived through presidential elections on the 6th of October 2024, which were a disgrace and witnessed grave violations. These elections that were boycotted by 94% of young Tunisians, and only 27% of voters took part. And we know that the current president, according to his own official figures, achieved 90% of votes. Of course, these elections, there were preparations for these elections because it was not possible for a dictator to win elections without repression, without restricting freedoms and persecuting his political opponents. And he set the ground for these elections by placing his rivals in these elections. He put some of them in prison and opened judicial investigations against others. And to keep this brief, he prosecuted 13 presidential candidates. Some of them are still in prison, the most important of whom and whose case is concerning. It's the case of Ayesh Demel, whose candidacy was accepted by the Election Commission and was included on the list of candidates. He has been in prison since the 6th of September, 1 month before the elections, and hence he was not able to hold an election campaign. And we all know that he achieved 7% of official vote, but in return, he has been subjected to 35 cases for alleged falsification of electoral endorsements, and he was sentenced to over 35 years in prison. So these political prisoners, this is the first one that we must draw attention to. So he was an engineer, a chemical engineer, and a businessman and a former member of parliament. Hence, it was surprising to see him stand as a candidate, which cost him his freedom. Also, the case of Abir Moussi, who is a lawyer and the president of a party, who has been in prison since 6th of October 2023 because of the application of Article 54, the infamous article related to the spreading of fake news and defamation. She has several cases against her, and she has been sentenced to prison, and she is still in prison. Also, Lotfi Mraihi, who is a doctor who was imprisoned before the election, 4 or 5 months before the elections. As for the other candidates, such as Abdelatif al-Makki, Mundar Znaidi, Imad Daimi, Murad al-Masoudi, Nizar al-Shari, all of these, Safi Said, also, they are being tried. Some are abroad, some are in Tunisia. They are threatened at any moment to be imprisoned. So this situation, to diagnose the current situation just before the elections and after the elections. So this period before the elections, we witnessed grave violations of freedom of expression and freedom of opinion and freedom of demonstration, and we witnessed several arrests of journalists and commentators and lawyers based on the infamous Decree 54 related to the publishing of fake news and defamation on social media. Also, these detentions included several politicians from various parties and also former members of parliament. There are 123 members of parliament who are being interrogated for conspiring against the state, for holding an online plenary to repeal the coup, and now they are being accused of conspiracy against the state. We have former presidents such as Hamad Jbali, Ali Al-Arayeb. Ali Al-Arayeb is in prison. Also, former Prime Minister Mahdi Boujum'a, and the former head of government who is abroad. They are being prosecuted. And also a former president, Dr. Munsif al-Marzouqi, he is also being prosecuted in several cases for conspiracy against the state, and also on the basis of the anti-terrorism law. And also the Speaker of Parliament, Rashid Ghannouchi, who has been in prison for almost 2 years, and he is 83 years old, for giving a political speech, a peaceful speech without calling for violence or extremism. So also these detentions and prosecutions have also included heads of civil society organizations such as iWatch, Muraqibun, election observers, for politically motivated charges, including receiving suspicious funds from foreign sources. Most of these were critical of the government. None of this would have happened had there been an independent judicial system that is not under the control of the president. Unfortunately, today, the situation of the judiciary is very dangerous as a result of the violations that undermine its independence and the basic foundations, such as the supremacy of the law and separation of powers. And today, the executive interferes in the judiciary and harasses and pressurizes lawyers and judges almost on a daily basis. And you know that there have been dismissals and imprisonment and prosecution of several judges, and hence the right to a fair trial and trust in the judiciary are almost completely in existence. Today also, the situation is getting worse in the absence of the Supreme Judicial Council, which we all know was dissolved. and also the temporary council that was imposed and appointed by the president is not functioning. Hence, the judiciary is being run by the justice minister based on decrees. So the dismissal of judges and appointment of judges is being done by the justice minister in contravention of all international standards in relation to the independence of the judiciary. And we all know that the African Court on the 3rd of October in 2024 ruled on the on Decree 53, presidential decree, on the basis of which the Supreme Judicial Council was dissolved, and Decree 516, on the basis of which Qais Said dismissed 57 judges without providing them any of their due rights. So the African Court on People's Rights and Human Rights ruled that these actions against judges constitute a dangerous threat, and ruled that these judges should be reinstated within 35 days. So it gave the government 15 days to execute this ruling, but the authorities, unfortunately, have not abided by this binding ruling. Also, I would like to discuss the situation of another political prisoner, Mr. Noureddin Bhiri, former justice minister, former member of parliament, lawyer, and one of the leading members of another party. On the 19th of October 2024, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison, 20 years in prison, for the charge of threatening the nature of the state on the basis of a non-existent Facebook post alleging that the post was inciting people to rebellion. Although the interrogation judge appointed an expert to find this post, which was never found. What draws our attention is that Mr. Noureddin Bhiri, when he was arrested, was subjected to severe violence, which caused the breaking of his shoulder, leading to an operation. And he was sentenced despite the fact that the Anti-Torture National Commission, which is an official state commission, it confirmed that Noureddin Bhiri was subjected to violent acts by the security forces and the interrogation judge, who refused to allow him to be examined by doctors, although he could see the traces of torture and violence against Noureddin Bhiri. And the Anti-Torture Commission confirmed that what Noureddin Bhiri was subjected to constitutes inhumane treatments and a violation of the Anti-Torture Commission and the Tunisian Penal Code. Despite this report, and despite the lawyers' requests to the court to postpone the trial, to examine the complaints they submitted for torture after the torture he had been subjected to during his detention. So in the first hearing, the court accepted the postponement, and in its second hearing, it repealed its former decision. And although lawyers insisted on their rights, because a complaint for torture is important and has consequences for the process, but the court refused, and the prosecutor refused, to open an investigation into these torture allegations, despite the existence of this report and letters by the lawyers to the president and the justice minister, holding them responsible. But to this day, there has been no investigation into what Nuruddin al-Hiri was subjected to. So this is a sample which I believe confirms that today torture is back to Tunisia. Unfortunately, after we had believed that this black page in our history had been turned forever, although we had undertaken the process of transitional justice in a similar way to South Africa, we set a law for transitional justice and the Truth and Dignity Commission, which managed the process, the transitional justice process. Unfortunately, today we find that the president of the Truth and Dignity Commission, Mrs. Siham bin Sedrine, since the 1st of August 2024, has been in prison for a laughable charge of falsifying the final report of the commission. So the report that she herself had written, she is accused of falsifying it. So today, the situation is dangerous. After the great steps taken in all domains, all the progress, we had witnessed elections in 2011, 2014, 2019. Unfortunately, since the 25th of July, 2021, all of that is part of the past, and very sadly, it is impossible for us to remain silent in the face of such a situation, particularly in view of the continuation of political trials and detentions, which have not stopped. There are almost daily prosecutions of activists on social media. If you write a post that is critical on social media, you are prosecuted on the basis of the infamous Decree 54 related to publishing fake news and what is called fake news. And therefore, it's necessary to stand. We all know that Tunisia has ratified all international treaties related to civil rights and political rights. So Tunisia is bound by these and required to respect them. There are decisions issued by the African Court on Human Rights and People's Rights, which Tunisia was a founding member of, and this court has ruled that what happened on the 25th of July is a coup against institutions. And to this day, despite the court's binding decision, which orders the authorities to return to constitutional legitimacy, this order has not been executed. And similarly with the decision issued on 14th of October, which exposed the practices against the judiciary. So